Welcome to the True Crime Family Channel. Our story starts on July 21st, 2011. A seemingly typical suburban neighborhood in Boynton Beach, Florida, wakes up to chaos as police swarm the home of a married couple. The house is quiet, almost too quiet. But behind the closed doors, a scandalous plot is unfolding. A story that will unravel a chilling tale of deception, manipulation, and a near-perfect crime. In the summer of 2008, Dahlia and Michael DiPolito's paths crossed in an unexpected way. Michael, fresh out of a complicated relationship and looking to turn over a new leaf, was introduced to Dahlia by mutual friends. She was everything he could have wanted: young, beautiful, and full of life. She worked as a real estate agent, and her charm was undeniable. Michael was smitten almost immediately. They began dating in August 2008, and things moved quickly. Dahlia seemed to be the perfect match for Michael. She was attentive, always making him feel like he was the center of her world. By October 2008, just 2 months into their relationship, Michael proposed. He believed he had finally found someone who could see beyond his troubled past, someone who accepted him for who he was. But as their whirlwind romance continued, Dahlia was harboring secrets of her own. While Michael had been open about his past, how he had served time in prison for fraud, and how he was working to rebuild his life, Dahlia was not as forthcoming. She told Michael she loved him, but she didn't tell him everything. Dahlia had a hidden side, one driven by a desire for wealth and control. By February 2009, they were married. But beneath the surface, Dahlia was already plotting. Unbeknownst to Michael, Dahlia had been secretly siphoning money from his accounts. She told Michael she was handling their finances, but instead, she was making moves to secure her own future. She even convinced Michael to transfer the title of their newly purchased townhouse into her name, saying it would be better for their financial security. Michael trusted her completely. As the months passed, Dahlia's manipulative behavior became more apparent. In May 2009, she began planting seeds of doubt in Michael's mind about their relationship, subtly suggesting that maybe he wasn't good enough for her. But Michael was blinded by love. He was so deeply committed to making their marriage work that he ignored the red flags. By the summer of 2009, Dahlia had grown tired of the charade. She had everything she wanted: control over Michael's assets, the house, the money, but she no longer wanted Michael. Instead of leaving him, Dahlia decided that the only way to get everything she desired was to remove Michael from the equation entirely. This is where the real story begins. Now, as spring turned into summer, Dahlia DiPolito's feelings towards her husband, Michael, shifted dramatically. What once seemed like a perfect life now felt like a prison to her. The luxurious cars, the beautiful home, and the comfortable lifestyle, they all became symbols of a life she no longer wanted, at least not with Michael. Dahlia craved independence and total control. Divorce crossed her mind, but she quickly dismissed it. A divorce would mean sharing everything, and Dahlia wasn't willing to give up half of what they had built. She wanted it all, every penny, every asset, and Michael stood in her way. By late May 2011, Dahlia began spending more time alone, making excuses to be away from Michael. She claimed she was working late or meeting with clients, but in reality, she was hatching a plan. She started researching ways to make someone disappear. At first, she toyed with the idea of poisoning Michael, but she realized it would be too risky and could easily be traced back to her. She needed something clean, something that wouldn't point directly to her. In early June, Dahlia's dissatisfaction turned into something far more dangerous. She confided in a friend, someone she thought could help her find the right person to get the job done. This friend, who had connections with some shady individuals, mentioned a man who might be able to help. Dahlia was intrigued. By June 15th, Dahlia had made contact with the man. He introduced himself as a professional who could make problems like hers go away for a price. They met in a quiet, out-of-the-way restaurant to discuss the details. Dahlia was nervous, but she masked it well. She told him she wanted it to look like a robbery gone wrong. Michael was to be killed in their home, and the house ransacked to make it seem like a burglary. She asked how much it would cost, and the man gave her a figure, $7,000. It was a steep price, but Dahlia didn't hesitate. She agreed to pay a whopping $200 down payment up front, with the rest to be paid after the job was done. Over the next week, Dahlia continued her daily routine as if nothing was wrong. But behind the scenes, she was preparing for the murder. On June 23rd, she handed over the down payment and provided the man with detailed instructions about Michael's schedule, the layout of their house, and even what time would be best to carry out the act. She was cold and calculating, leaving nothing to chance. As the days passed, Dahlia remained calm. She even told Michael she was planning a trip for the two of them once her work settled down, planting seeds of normalcy to keep him unsuspecting. But all the while, she was counting down the days until Michael would be gone for good. This was no longer about love or marriage. It was about survival and greed. By mid-July, Dahlia DiPolito believed she was on the verge of getting everything she wanted. She had no idea that the man she thought was a hitman was actually an undercover police officer. The Boynton Beach Police Department had grown suspicious of Dahlia after hearing rumors and witnessing previous strange behavior from her. They set up a sting operation, hoping to catch her in the act. On July 17th, Dahlia met the undercover officer once again. In a small, dimly lit parking lot, she outlined her plan in chilling detail. She explained Michael's daily routine, noting exactly when he would be home alone. She described their home's layout, pointing out the best places to stage the robbery. Dahlia even discussed how she wanted the murder to look: quick, clean, and like a burglary gone wrong. All of this was recorded by the police, who were building an airtight case against her. The next day, July 18th, Dahlia met with the officer again. This time, she was even more resolute. She handed him a $200 down payment, along with a recent photograph of Michael. Dahlia was completely calm, her voice steady and her expression cold. During their conversation, she made it clear just how serious she was, telling the officer she was 5,000% sure she wanted her husband dead. The words came out effortlessly, showing just how deep her desire to eliminate Michael had become. With Dahlia's intent crystal clear, the Boynton Beach Police Department knew it was time to act. On July 19, they informed Michael of his wife's murderous plan. Shocked but willing to help, Michael agreed to participate in a staged operation to catch Dahlia in the act. The plan was simple but effective. They would fake Michael's murder and record Dahlia's reaction to the news. Michael was taken to a safe location, where they made it look like he had been brutally killed. Blood was smeared across his body, and photos were taken to use as evidence. Meanwhile, the police prepared to visit Dahlia, ready to see how she would respond when she thought her plan had succeeded. As Dahlia carried on her day, she had no idea that the walls were closing in on her. She believed everything was falling into place, that soon she would be rid of Michael and free to live the life she dreamed of. But by the end of July 19th, her plan would start to unravel, leading to a dramatic confrontation she never saw coming. On July 21st, as the sun began to rise over Boynton Beach, the police operation was set into motion. It was early, just 6 a.m., when officers quietly approached the Dipolito home. They were responding to a call, one they themselves had orchestrated, about a domestic disturbance. Everything was carefully staged. Inside the house, the police had created a gruesome scene. Michael Dipolito, alive and well but hidden away, was made up to look like he had been shot during a break-in. Blood splatters, broken furniture, and signs of a forced entry were all meticulously arranged to convince anyone who saw it that a violent crime had occurred. The officers knew they had to get every detail right to ensure that Dahlia's plan would completely fall apart. An hour later, at 7 a.m., Dahlia Dipolito was contacted by the police. She was informed that something terrible had happened at her home and that she needed to come immediately. The urgency in their voices was undeniable. Dahlia, believing her plan had gone off without a hitch, rushed to the scene. When she arrived, she found her street lined with police cars, the house surrounded by yellow crime scene tape. Officers were everywhere, and the atmosphere was tense. As she approached the house, the police stopped her. "There's been a break-in," one officer explained. Dahlia's eyes widened as she listened. "Your husband, he didn't make it." The officer's words hung in the air, and Dahlia's performance began. She gasped, tears welling up in her eyes. She clutched at her chest, trying to portray the grieving widow. But the police were watching closely, and the cameras were rolling. Her reaction was exactly what they had expected: forced, calculated, and devoid of real emotion. Dahlia was playing her part, but so were they. By 7:30 a.m., Dahlia was escorted to the police station. The officers told her they needed her help with the investigation, and she willingly complied. She believed she was in control, that everything was going according to her plan. But when she arrived at the station, Dahlia was in for a shock. The same undercover officer she had hired to kill Michael was waiting for her. He was no longer playing the role of a hitman. He was now a detective, ready to reveal the truth. The officer explained that the entire murder plot had been a setup. Michael was alive and safe, and the police had been watching her every move. As the realization dawned on Dahlia, her facade began to crumble. She had been outsmarted, and there was no way out. The police had all the evidence they needed: recordings of her chilling conversations, the money she had handed over, and even the photograph of Michael she had given to the supposed hitman. By 8 a.m., the situation was clear. Dahlia Dipolito was arrested on the spot, charged with solicitation of first-degree murder. The evidence against her was overwhelming, leaving no room for doubt. As she was led away in handcuffs, the police officers knew they had successfully spoiled her plans. Every detail of the operation had gone off without a hitch, and now Dahlia would face the consequences of her actions. The events of that morning were not just the end of Dahlia's plan, but the beginning of her downfall. What she thought would be the perfect crime had turned into her own undoing, all because the police had been one step ahead. ensuring that justice would be served. August 2011. As summer drew to a close, Dalia DiPolito's case became the focus of national media. The story of the charming young woman who had tried to have her husband killed captivated the public. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, eager to catch every twist and turn of the trial. On August 2, 2011, Dalia walked into the courtroom for the first day of her trial. She appeared calm and collected, dressed in a modest outfit that was likely chosen to evoke sympathy. But behind the scenes, her defense team was scrambling to find a way to save her. The prosecution wasted no time presenting their case. They had a mountain of evidence against Dalia, and they laid it out in excruciating detail. The recordings of her meetings with the undercover officer were played for the jury. In those recordings, Dalia's voice was clear, calm, and chilling as she discussed how she wanted her husband, Michael, to be killed. She talked about it as if she were planning a simple errand, not the murder of the man she had promised to love and cherish. The prosecution also presented the photograph of Michael that Dalia had handed over, the $200 she had paid as a down payment, and the detailed notes she had given about his daily routine. Dalia's defense team had a different story to tell. They claimed that the entire situation was a misunderstanding, a reality TV stunt gone horribly wrong. According to them, Dalia and Michael had been working together to create a scenario that would land them on a reality show. The hitman plot, they argued, was part of that plan, a way to create drama and get noticed by television producers. They painted Dalia as a woman caught up in a misguided attempt at fame, not a cold-blooded killer. Throughout the month of August, witnesses took the stand. The undercover officer who had posed as the hitman testified, describing in detail how Dalia had approached him, what she had said, and how she had handed over the money without hesitation. The prosecution also called on other officers involved in the sting operation, all of whom confirmed that Dalia's intentions were clear. She wanted Michael dead. On the defense side, Dalia's attorneys tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case. They questioned the legality of the recordings and argued that the police had entrapped Dalia, pushing her into a situation she would never have found herself in otherwise. They brought forward witnesses who claimed to have seen Michael and Dalia discussing their supposed reality TV plan. But despite their efforts, the evidence against Dalia was overwhelming. By early September, the trial was reaching its climax. On September 12, 2011, both sides presented their closing arguments. The prosecution reminded the jury of the cold, calculated nature of Dalia's actions. They played the recordings one last time, letting Dalia's own words condemn her. The defense, on the other hand, pleaded with the jury to see Dalia as a misguided woman, someone who had been caught up in a fantasy that spiraled out of control. 3 days later, on September 15, 2011, the jury returned with their verdict. After just a few hours of deliberation, they found Dalia DiPolito guilty of solicitation of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Dalia, who had remained composed throughout the trial, finally showed signs of cracking. Her face paled, and she clutched the edge of the table as if to steady herself. The judge, looking stern, announced her sentence: 20 years in prison. Dalia was led away in handcuffs, her once glamorous life now reduced to the bleak reality of a prison cell. But even as Dalia was escorted out of the courtroom, her legal battle was not over. Her defense team immediately filed an appeal, arguing that the jury had been biased by the intense media coverage and that the police had used unethical tactics to trap her. The appeal would drag on for years, keeping Dahlia's story in the headlines and leaving the public to wonder, was she truly the cold-blooded killer the prosecution portrayed, or was there more to the story? The courtroom drama of Dalia DiPolito became a tale of manipulation, greed, and the lengths to which one person would go to get what they wanted. Her conviction marked the end of one chapter, but the story was far from finished. The legal wrangling that followed would keep her fate hanging in the balance for years to come, a final twist in a story that had already taken so many unexpected turns. After Dalia DiPolito's initial conviction in 2011, her legal team did not give up. Over the next several years, the case continued to draw attention, with multiple appeals and retrials. Each attempt was filled with drama, as her attorneys argued that Dalia had been entrapped by the police, that the trial had been unfair, and that the media coverage had biased the jury. Despite these efforts, the conviction was upheld, but Dalia remained determined to clear her name. In 2014, her attorneys filed another appeal, claiming that the police had manipulated her into committing a crime she would not have otherwise considered. They argued that the sting operation was more about creating a sensational story than delivering justice. This appeal was denied, but Dalia's legal team persisted. They continued to push for a new trial, presenting the argument that the intense media coverage had made it impossible for her to receive a fair trial. By 2015, the case had become a fixture in the news cycle once again. Television programs revisited the story, true crime shows dissected the case, and the public watched with interest as Dalia's legal saga unfolded. Her attorneys managed to secure a new trial in 2016, citing potential jury bias from the first trial. The courtroom was once again filled with tension as the prosecution presented the same damning evidence. The recordings of Dalia plotting her husband's murder, the money she paid the undercover officer, and the photograph of Michael were all laid out for the jury to consider. In 2017, Dalia DiPolito was back in court, hoping that this time the outcome would be different. Her legal team argued fiercely, once again, pointing to the idea that Dalia had been entrapped. They claimed that she had been pressured into making the deal with the undercover officer, that she never truly intended to go through with the murder. But the prosecution countered with the overwhelming evidence that had been presented in the previous trials. The jury listened to hours of testimony and reviewed the evidence carefully. The recordings of Dalia's calm, calculated discussions about how to kill her husband were impossible to ignore. The jury deliberated, but the decision was clear. On June 21, 2017, Dalia DiPolito was once again found guilty of solicitation of first-degree murder. This time, however, the sentence was different. Taking into account the years she had already served, the judge sentenced Dalia to 16 years in prison. As the judge read out the sentence, Dalia showed little emotion, perhaps resigned to her fate after years of legal battles. She was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, knowing that this might be the end of her fight for freedom. The media continued to cover the case, but by now, the public's interest had begun to wane. What had once been a sensational story had turned into a long, drawn-out legal saga, with each new chapter adding little to the narrative. Dalia's story, once filled with intrigue and shocking twists, had come to a predictable conclusion. Despite her numerous appeals and the attention her case received, the evidence against her remained too strong to overcome. As she was transported back to prison, the woman who had once dreamed of a life filled with luxury and freedom was now facing the reality of spending the better part of her life behind bars. The final chapter of Dalia D'Ippolito's story had been written, and it ended not with the dramatic victory she had hoped for, but with the cold, hard truth that justice had prevailed. Her attempts to escape her past had failed, and now all that was left was the long, quiet years of imprisonment that lay ahead. The story of Dalia D'Ippolito is one that leaves many questions unanswered. How could someone so seemingly normal and charming be capable of such cold-blooded planning? What drove her to take such extreme measures to get what she wanted? As we reflect on this case, it serves as a reminder that sometimes the darkest intentions can hide behind the most innocent of facades. What would drive someone to such lengths? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more true crime stories that defy belief.